Refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. With palms down. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for showing up. Those in the back, will you do me a favor and just on that end of the blinds, just yank them to the side and pull them down pretty much 3/4. Thank you. Other end. Other end. Yeah. Thanks. No. This is why I love the Dharma Bum Temple. Should we all watch it? Thank you. What a team effort. Only 4 people to get it down. That's not bad. Usually I do that right when I walk in, but I forgot. So good morning, everybody. Once again, thanks for being here. Something just came in that I just wanted to share before we sit. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world today that is very easy to allow your emotions to just get crazy. 100 years ago, same thing. 1,000 years ago, same thing. And 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, probably the same thing. And that doesn't mean that you don't stop fighting for what you believe is right. This is not about just ignoring all the pain and suffering and chaos and havoc in the world. Buddhist practice is very much about engaging in community and society and doing what you can to create change to make this world a kinder, gentler, safer space. I mean, that's literally the reason the Buddha at the beginning set up what are called precepts. Right? I'm not getting into that right now, but there were 227 to 311 precepts, guidelines put in place to create a safe, harmonious community, the Sangha. And so it's not about just ignoring what's going on in the world, but as you're fighting for whatever you're fighting for, pushing for whatever you're pushing for, speaking out for whatever you're speaking out about, make sure you watch your own anger and your own hatred. Because very likely what people are fighting for and speaking out against is towards things that they think are filled with tons of anger and hatred. And yet there we are bringing our own anger and hatred into a situation that we perceive already has anger and hatred. And I don't know about you, but for a person who grew up really angry and hated lots of people and lots of things, when anger and hatred meets anger and hatred, nothing good comes out of that. So continue to fight for whatever you're fighting for, passionately, as aggressively as you like, regardless of what other people think about what you're saying or doing or posting or sharing or liking on the social media world. But don't forget to check yourself. Where are you at? Not only from a place of making sure we don't bring more anger and hatred into a place that probably already has tons of anger and hatred, but carrying around so much anger and hatred every single day, every moment, in every conversation, in every social media post, in every interaction will destroy you. And if you're walking around filled with anger and hatred towards everything and everyone for how the world is, there's only so long that you can take that most people can take that. So, bringing more love, kindness, and compassion into situations that are filled with anger and hatred isn't just for that situation. It's for your own peace of mind, your own sanity, your own mental, emotional health, and well-being. And I've been at this stuff long enough to know that this place doesn't fill up every day because everybody here is peaceful and happy and everything is good. If everything was peaceful and happy and everything was good in all of our lives, we'd be at home watching cartoons, eating cereal right now. But we're here. So there's a chance that some of us may be carrying a little more anger and hatred than we need to. And see how we can potentially soften some of that. Make life a little gentler for you, first and foremost. So, with that, we'll start with a meditation practice. For those who are joining virtually, glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. As you are, feel free to, there's a chat box on your screen. Feel free to say hello. When we get to questions, I'll do my best to respond to them as well. So for those who are maybe sitting for the first time or here for the first time, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. I mean, don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you are in a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Same thing if you're on a bench or chair. Just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Hands can be on the knees or on the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. It just means you need to move. And for those who are brand new, you're not trying to stop your thoughts. You're not trying to empty your thoughts. You're not trying to go blank. You're not trying to think nothing. You're going to sit. Your mind will wander. I'll say things periodically to remind you that you're lost in thought or you have fallen asleep, which isn't the end of the world, but you didn't come all this way to fall asleep. Unless you did, and then you can just sleep. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, we'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. We'll start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Where's your mind? Lost in thought? Return to breath. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting. breathing. With the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. Most important, the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after, and Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment. And very often the present moment is filled with conflict, chaos, difficulties, challenges. Many of us have spent much of our lives running from things and people and places. This practice is learning to be with life as it arises. Safely, of course, but be with life as it arises. And changing your mind and your reaction to life as it arises. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. And that's why it's so easy, because you just have to be nice to people, which I know everyone in this room can do. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, wishing they did this, wishing they did that, hoping they do this, hoping they do that. Why did they do this? Why did they do that? We spend so much time focused on other people's mess. This is about looking at your own mess. And once you do that, life gets simpler. Life gets easier. And in reality, not much changed except your perception of what's occurring. When we make life less about us and more about others, life gets easier. So with that, I'll pause. For me, always, I really just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And to those who are joining virtually, again, welcome. Glad you're here. Feel free. There's a chat box on your screen. Feel free to say hello. If you have any questions, you can put them there, and I'll do my best to respond. So we'll use the rest of our brief time for questions. Yeah.
So I've been reading through the two books you recommended, Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, and The Lotus Extreme. And so one thing that, like the it seemed like kind of a contradiction to me. It's like the second of the two poisons is anger, right? And then in these two books, there's a number of anecdotes about Buddhist monks who were teachers who berated their students or yelled at their students or hit their student with a staff or something. But that didn't seem to be presented as one of the two points. So what's going on there?
Man, so many ways to respond to this. I mean, since I did suggest those two books, I'll take full credit for absolutely confusing you. Sometimes people perceive truth and honesty and tone as anger or not caring. I think of the way I was trained in Buddhist practice, and I hated one of my Zen masters. I argued with her constantly. She was hard on me. You know why? Because she cared about me. And she saw that my own ignorance, my own attachment to my ego, my own desire to want to fight everything was causing a lot of suffering. And if she had just come up and given me a gentle hug and patted me on the back and said, "Oh, it's okay, Jeff, everything's going to be fine," I would have continued to be miserable the rest of my life. So I think what's going on here, which as you continue to read, I'll let you reach this understanding on your own. I mean, I can't give you any understanding anyways. You got to come to this realization on your own. But my suggestion is what you're perceiving at this point in time, knowing those two books intimately, what you're perceiving as anger is not anger at all. Coming from the Zen Buddhist monk training mindset, right? Now let's just bring that back to everyday life for all of us sitting in this room. As you said, the second noble truth, those who are brand new, the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. It's the first thing he taught, and many Buddhist practitioners and teachers and scholars for the last 2,500 years say all of Buddhist teachings are in these first Four Noble Truths. That's it. For 2,500 years, we've been retelling the same things over and over and over again. The first thing the Buddha said is life is dukkha, often translated to suffering. It's a really terrible translation into the English language because it makes it sound as if everything is so heavy and extreme. We do experience tremendous trauma, tremendous loss, tremendous pain, tremendous suffering. Dukkha is also ordering a latte and not getting the right amount of pumps of caramel that you wanted, or ordering a sandwich when you hate mayonnaise and you say no mayonnaise, and they put mayonnaise on it anyways. This is also dukkha. Not going to kill you unless you're allergic to mayonnaise, but our entire life is filled with little things that go wrong according to our perception. Heavy, traumatic stuff and everyday things. It's too hot, it's too cold, I don't like the way this shirt looks, I don't like the way they prepared my sandwich, this latte isn't proper for me. This is dukkha. And the Buddha said that our entire lives is filled with moments of this. The second thing he says is what's the cause. Other words for dukkha: discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, things just being out of place in your mind, right? So the second thing he said, which is the nature of your question, is, and Nick, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The nature of Nick's question is the cause of suffering. And the Buddha said the cause of suffering is greed, anger, ignorance. We always want more, never feel like we have enough. Just introduce the iPhone craze, and you can figure that one out on your own. Anger, we're always angry about the way things are. And ignorance is the third one. Ignorance meaning we're ignoring reality. In essence, we spend our entire lives roaming around with only our perception of reality, and we think our perception of reality is correct. And so we spend our entire lives trying to prove and defend and fight our perception. We overcome greed with generosity, giving people time, giving people attention, giving people a heart, giving them a smile, whatever it is. Just listen, be present with people. This is how we overcome greed, with the practice of generosity. We overcome anger with compassion, right? And that ties into what you're perceiving at this point in time as anger is actually compassion, but just in a level that maybe you just haven't experienced, but I'm sure you have in your life. You ever had anyone, do you have a parent?
Yes.
Yeah? Has your parent ever, one of them ever told you to do shit that you didn't want to do, that you didn't like?
No.
And you just, a couple times, right? Lucky you. And you just assumed they were wrong, and you screamed at them, and you called them bad names because you think your parents hate you because they told you not to cross the street without looking. Right? They're not angry at you. They're not hating you. They're not berating you. They're actually expressing love and compassion because they don't want you to get hurt. Right? So we overcome anger with compassion. And the ignorance we overcome with wisdom. Often people ask, what is ultimate wisdom? Don't worry about ultimate wisdom. Just ask yourself, y'all know when you do something stupid? Yeah, do that less. And by default, you have greater wisdom. So, keep reading.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else? Yeah.
My name is Rob. I'm new to Buddhism. This is only my second time related to Buddhism. I'm just trying to understand various things
Yeah.
at a high level. So, is there a concept in Buddhism related to justice? And if there is, then how does one control or actually react to perceptions of things like injustice, which could range from like really minor things like, I don't know, favoritism or bias to things like, I don't know, extreme violence or something?
Sure.
How you react to that?
Yeah. So let me just paraphrase the question for those who didn't hear those virtually. Your question is Rob, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is your second time, so new to Buddhism. Your question is there a concept of justice in Buddhism? And if so, and how do we practice response to injustice going on in the world, right? There is a sense of justice, but probably differently from what you may perceive in kind of an everyday conversation around justice, right, wrong, good, bad. So I always introduce, anytime questions like this come up around around injustice, right? Thich Nhat Hanh was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, just recently passed away the last couple of years, but he fought with Martin Luther King for social justice around racial inequality. And Martin Luther King nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize for his work around that. And he coined the phrase, what we refer to in Buddhism as engaged Buddhism. So very often, especially for those who might be new to Buddhism, you might think that you've watched The Little Buddha or whatever Buddhist movie you've seen, a couple YouTube clips, and you see these monks and nuns, they look all happy and peaceful. They're a freaking mess inside, first of all. Let me just make that very clear. Don't allow the illusion of the robe and the shaved head and the sitting under a tree with a smile on their face to assume that they are just fully at peace. They're struggling just like everybody else. But they are determined and committed on a much deeper level than many of us to actually finding and cultivating, I should say, that inner peace that lies within. So very often you might see these images and think that they're kind of disengaged or cut off from society or from the world. And the practice is actually to engage around social, economic, political, racial injustice. But to engage in a way, as I spoke about it, were you here from the beginning when I spoke? That's like when I walked in? No? Oh, you missed it all. It's all right. That's exactly actually what I was addressing, was that as we fight for what we fight for, and as we speak out for what we speak out for, there's no Buddhist teaching that says remain silent and become a doormat, so to speak, and just let everybody be in pain while we find our own little inner peace. Right? I come from a place of tremendous privilege in every way. So it's super easy for me to just block out the world and say, I'm good. Nobody's harming me. But the war that I had my whole life was inside my own head. And then I took that into the world. Right? So when you go into the world and you fight for what you believe in, against all the injustice in the world, and I strongly recommend you continue to do that, can you do it from a place of love and kindness and compassion, not from a place of anger and hatred and rage? Do you understand? So the other thing to add to that around justice is that Buddhist teachings, and for someone who's new or anybody who's new, right, there's nobody judging us. So many of us grew up in these kind of Western religions where you're being judged, you're going to go to heaven, you're going to go to hell, you're going to wherever you're going, right? In Buddhist practice, you're not being judged. I mean, other than by every single person in the room right now. Right? But you're not being judged. You're creating your life, meaning your thoughts, your words, your actions, which the Buddha called karma. Karma translates to action. Your thoughts, your words, your actions create your reality. So it's not about judgment. It's about being mindful and aware of what you think and what you say and what you do, because that has a huge impact. So we focus on bringing acts of love and kindness into the world to hopefully create a safer, more harmonious community and the world around us. Does that help? Yeah.
I could be mistaken, but I think you practice Pure Land Buddhism. Can you talk about that in I guess, if you had to put it in a paragraph to understand what is that, and then how is it different from other traditions?
Yeah. So to put it, the questions around, I practice. David was asking, I practice Pure Land Buddhism? Can I kind of summarize that? And put it into context, maybe how it may differ from other schools of Buddhism. First, to understand, for those who may be new, is that you have the Buddha. He was a prince from India. He was raised Hindu, as you know, and they had beliefs at the time in Hindu gods and goddesses. It's how he was raised, right? Buddhism didn't exist when he was born. Siddhartha Gautama, he was a prince. He left home at 29. He roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. At 35, he sat down under a Bodhi tree and said, "I'm not leaving until I figure out why we suffer." He then taught the Four Noble Truths, understood that we suffer, as I mentioned, because of craving, desire, greed, anger, ignorance. He taught that for 45 years and then he died. Right? And what came out of his life and then after is what we call Buddhism, which is simply the teachings of the Buddha. It's important to point out along this line, and also even the question earlier, that at the time of the Buddha, as a Hindu, he believed, growing up, they believed in Hindu goddesses and gods. And, there were endless gods and goddesses, right? Very different. This is 500 years before Christ, so it's very different from the God that we may refer to today. So at the time he was teaching, they asked him, should we believe in gods and goddesses? And he said, look, that's up to you. He said, I'm not a god. I'm just some dude. He probably didn't say I'm just some dude. I'm paraphrasing there. But he said, I'm just a human. I can't tell you what to believe in. I can share with you a simple, peaceful way of life. And if you have your belief in gods and goddesses, keep them. If you don't, then that's okay too. So the same thing here, right? I reference this every so often, but quick show of hands, how many of you are Buddhist? Look around the room. See, it's always like 2 and then a half, The person who's like, I want to be, but I'm not really sure. If I put it up, what does that mean, right? So nobody other than a couple people who are Buddhist, Christians, Catholics, Muslims, Jews, pagans, Mormons, lack thereof, whatever, right? So this practice isn't about being Buddhist. It's not about becoming Buddhist. It's about being kind and peaceful in whatever religion you want or don't want. That's what was going on when the Buddha was alive. When he died, you have Buddhism that then spread out of India, goes south, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, for a couple hundred years, and it goes north, China, Japan, Korea, around the turn of the century, 500-600 years later, then it goes into Tibet, 1,000 years after he died. So you have all these different schools of Buddhism that are formed. And those schools of Buddhism, for the most part, come out of a meshing with the local culture, right? So when Buddhism went into China, for example, you had Taoism, Confucianism, Shintoism, and so Buddhism meshed with that. You had the local culture and beliefs, and then you had the philosophical teachings of the Buddha, which was how to live a kind and gentle life. So that's what was meshed with. So Pure Land Buddhism comes from a Buddha known as Amitabha. His name means infinite light or boundless life. He had 48 great vows. And the belief in Pure Land Buddhism is that you recite the Buddha's name, right? In meditation, you recite the name, whether to yourself or out loud. You follow precepts, meaning stop doing stupid shit. And you do meditation. And with that practice, there is a rebirth that occurs into the Buddha's Pure Land where there is no suffering. That is the Pure Land Buddhist teaching. Very much the way we may see dying and going to a heaven, right? that rebirth into a Pure Land. So for me, being, when I say raised in, I wasn't raised in it, but my exposure to Buddhism, pretty hardcore early on for the first 4 or 5 years, was only through the lens of Taiwanese Buddhism and Pure Land Buddhist practice. And they're very devotional, very faith-based, very devout, right? People don't come here because they want to be Buddhist. They don't come here because they want a good rebirth, right? Most people come here because they just want to be peaceful, they want to be happy, and they want to be surrounded by people that aren't treating them like crap, right? Devotional, faith-based Buddhism is very different from that. It includes all of that, but it is also that 100% faith and belief that there is a Pure Land, that with that determination and that diligent practice, they would be reborn into the Pure Land where there is no more suffering. The difference is, the difference is that you have other schools of Buddhism that teach reincarnation, rebirth, continuation of consciousness. You have some schools that just say, there's just consciousness, so the physical form doesn't even matter. It's just a shell. So there's all kinds of different approaches and practices for 2,500 years within Buddhism. And ultimately, it doesn't matter. Just be kind. Trying to figure out rebirth when you weren't raised with that is worthless, in my opinion.
So out of curiosity, so is the Pure Land destination the same as Nirvana, or is that the ultimate world?
No, Nirvana and Pure Land are two different things. Nirvana literally means to extinguish. So when the Buddha died, right, Siddhartha Gautama, when he died, they called him the Buddha. They say he entered into Parinirvana, which means nirvana with no remainder, meaning no rebirth, no coming back, no going anywhere, just like a candle blowing out. That's it. But again, this is all heady stuff that I think is absolutely detrimental and meaningless with practice. I truly believe that. And I get it for those who are really, like to think about all that stuff, but I don't find it beneficial to practice. I actually find it harmful.
Yeah, and I think I just read it in all those books you suggest.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious to understand when I'm like, they reference to write on understand what they're referencing.
For those who didn't hear it, he said he reads it in all the books I recommend. Stop taking my book recommendations. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. It's not in Zen mind. Well, actually, even in Japanese Buddhism, they're Pure Land. Same. Japanese Buddhism is Pure Land Buddhism. Yeah. So I stand corrected. I have recommended books that don't talk about Pure Land Buddhism. What else? Yeah.
So I guess I was taught in a pretty black and white kind of way. There's the ordinary life where you just without mindfulness, just live your life. And then the other way that I was taught was just kind of all monk, strict mindfulness all the time, and not really engaging in sensuality and stuff like that. As lay people, how do we balance that, still enjoy stuff like music and TV and stuff like that, and not worry that we're not,
being good Buddhist enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. My suggestion from knowing you well enough, so the question, let me start with this. The question was, the teachings for him have been pretty black and white, either this kind of monk path and all this Buddhisty stuff, or this non-monk path and this lay life. How do you find a balance between the two, right? That in essence is why we started Dharma Bum Temple, was to actually find that balance, meaning that we're not monks and nuns here, we're lay people, but the practice of Buddhist teachings really do help you suffer a lot less, which you know. My suggestion to you personally, and I usually don't give personal advice, but in the privacy of our one-on-one conversation here, which I never have with people, drop your attachment to thinking that there's some something to gain from being this monk status, right? My master always said you could shave your head and put on a robe, and that doesn't make you a monk, right? It's what's in your mind and in your heart. So you have very strong attachments to fundamental Buddhism, meaning Pali Canon, Vinaya, Code of Conduct, which at the time, to put that into some context for you all, and very briefly, the Vinaya, the 227 to 311 precepts, and your question around, how can you listen to music and things like that, the Vinaya literally tells the monks and nuns, no music, no dancing, certain foods that you don't eat. They're pretty specific. Stop trying to live by those. those. It's not helping you, right? You love music. What's wrong with music? You love listening to music, you love making music, play music. Beautiful. It's your attachment to the Buddhist way. As one of the 3 people who raised his hand and defined himself as a Buddhist, I would actually work towards being less Buddhist. And you'll be happier. I mean that very seriously. I mean, from my personal journey, the time in the monastery when I wanted to be a monk, I was so determined to be that way. I would have been a terrible monk, right? We all have causes and conditions that arise in this life. And some people have the causes and conditions for a monastic path, a monk or nun path. And some don't. 99.9% of the people that I've ever seen through the Dharma Bums don't. Just be a dude who loves music, plays music, and stop fighting against this, but the Vinaya says don't listen to music. You're not a monk. And by the way, there are lots of monks who also listen to music and make music. So, you see the Japanese monk who raps the sutras because he's trying to get the younger generation? Be one of those guys. Yeah. Just Google Japanese monk rapping sutras. What else? Yeah.
You go again. I've got so many questions, but I guess
You're all good, man.
just one that comes to mind. So, look, got a low level one and a high level one. So maybe I'll just go for that high level one. What is enough? Obviously, if you can't put food on the table, you need to do something to feed yourself, right? But then you've got people who've got ridiculous amounts of excess, and they still seem to be chasing. And then there's other things in between where I guess if we didn't do it, you wouldn't have some of the, innovations that help us today. I used a car to get here. That wouldn't be possible. So what is enough about?
So the question is around when is enough enough? You gave an example of, you used a car to get here today without innovation. That wouldn't have happened. People who put excess amount of food on the table. So there's a teaching in Buddhism called the middle path. And again, this all being brand new to you. So my suggestion for everybody who's brand new always is, this stuff takes a few years to really settle in and kind of rattle your brain and completely shatter and destroy everything you've ever thought about life. Truly. This practice, I'm warning you now, will ruin your life as you know it if you continue. So you've been warned, right? There's an expression in Buddhism called against the stream, that the Buddhist teachings do go literally against the stream of what mainstream society and culture teaches us. And that's not good or bad. It doesn't mean we have to practice that, but that's really what it does. It goes against our conventional ways of seeing the world. And so my suggestion before even responding to your question is, I was always taught early on and still today, instead of looking for answers to my questions as I first began to engage in Buddhism, was to actually change the way I asked my questions. Meaning if I had a question, I got an answer, to not put that in a box and say question, answer, done. But take that knowledge, take that information, take that teaching, and see how that can continue to transform my way of living, which will then bring up additional questions, right? So let's come back to food. Does that make sense so far? So let's come back to food for a minute, the middle path. One, I'm not saying you did this, right? I usually wait 3 or 4 times before I pick on people, but we got to be very careful about how we judge people who in excess, right? Because maybe the person that we're judging in excess of excess food, maybe that's actually toned down from what they used to do, right? So how many shirts do you have? Not many. Give me a number. 4? You truly own only 4 shirts in your entire existence. And if you do, great, nothing against that, but I just want to be sure.
Yeah, I come from a background where basically from a very young age, my background is Hindu, so we used to have satsangs, gurus.
Sure.
Even though I'm very privileged as well, I was taught to live, and I've embodied that in a very frugal kind of way.
Yeah.
So that's how I am.
Okay, so if we went to your house right now and you showed me your closet, you would only have 4 shirts.
And we make everything ourselves as much as possible, grow everything ourselves
Yeah.
as much as possible.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Could you live with 3 shirts?
Probably.
Yeah. So maybe you live in excess. Right?
Maybe I don't need a shirt.
What's that?
Maybe I don't need a shirt.
Maybe you don't need a shirt at all. Right? Again, I mean, the whole idea of the Buddha going from, which, the way you were raised, obviously you know the story, right? Going from a prince to a homeless wandering beggar, which is what he was, symbolic of cutting the hair, getting rid of the princely clothes, taking rags, sewing it together to create the robe. The middle path teaching is not about how much we have of something. It's about looking at our lives and finding where are we out of balance. And if we have 4 shirts, if we have 50 shirts, there are people downtown right now, 10,000 people sleeping on the streets downtown right now, that would love 1 shirt that was new to them. And if you took your 4 shirts and you gave them 1, you would have 3 shirts, probably be okay, and they would have a new shirt and be incredibly happy, and both people will still live. The challenge is, if we did something like that, we would probably pick, of the 4 shirts, the one we like the least. Or the oldest one, or the one that has a little tear in it, right? Take your favorite one. The one that feeds your ego, that feeds your pride, that you think you look great in. Give that one away, right? You ever go out to eat? Yeah? You know how much you pay when you go out to eat? A lot more than what it actually costs to go out to eat. All of us. So this isn't about going out to eat being bad, but if we spend $30 on a meal, maybe we spend $15. We still eat. We got $15 to go feed somebody who has nothing to eat. Maybe people are used to spending $150 on a meal. Maybe they're down to spending $100, and we look at them and we're like, look at all that excess food they just bought. But 2 weeks ago, they were spending $200 on a meal. So, middle path balance. And again, this practice isn't about judging what do others do. It's not about how they're living their lives. It's looking at your life and saying, where am I physically, mentally, and emotionally out of balance? Where am I consuming too much? Where am I taking too much of people's time, too much of their energy, too much of their space? Where do I have just a closet full of shoes that I just don't need? Right? Why do I worry about my shirt matching my belt as if it makes a difference? Why? Because billions of dollars are spent on advertising to tell you that your shirt and belt and shoes must match. And when fall comes, that color changes. It is the stupidest thing in the world. But we are all stuck in that. We are all, not all, I shouldn't say all, many of us are raised in that, and we grew up around that. We don't think there's anything wrong with it. New fall line is out, gotta go get new colors because the season changed. We have enough. Find a balance. But I also caution people when you learn about Buddhism, it's not about making drastic change immediately, because most can't do that. It'll tread lightly. So, we'll do one more question before we close. Yeah.
It's not as much of a question. It sort of is. And by the way, I happen to own more than 100 silk Tommy Bahama shirts. I love them, and I only get rid of them when they wear out.
Yeah.
I've had them for 20 years.
And I love you anyways.
That was just a confession. I have encountered a number of books about Buddha and Buddhism by non-Buddhists.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to recommend any. I mean, I'll just mention one that I found very enjoyable, which is by Karen Armstrong, just about the life of the Buddha, an ex-Catholic nun who writes a lot of books about religion. It's an interesting perspective for the simple reason that she isn't a Buddhist. She appreciates it, and she's looking at it from more of a Westerner, trying to find some historical thread and context, like you talked about.
Definitely.
Life.
Yeah, Karen Armstrong's book. What's the title of that book?
Buddha.
There you go. Yeah, I think it's, to me, years ago, a dear friend of mine who got into Buddhist practice, she was Catholic, and her Catholic faith was really important to her. And when she started to learn about Buddhism, it changed her life. And she said it actually brought her closer to her Catholic faith. And she referred to it as a software upgrade, right? And I felt, for me, that was a beautiful example of how to utilize Buddhist teachings. And to your point around even just books and authors, very often, that's why I love listening and learning so much from people here. Very often the best things we learn about Buddhism are not from Buddhists. They're actually from like 8-year-olds, but and there's another. I think there's a lot of value from any books we read around Buddhism that come from different perspectives. I think is so important. I think Krishnamurti is one of the most brilliant minds I've ever listened to or read, and he pretty much shatters Buddhism completely. Buddhism is just another construct that everybody has bought into, just like everything else, right? And he's one of the greatest minds I think that exists. So I think looking at Buddhist teachings from outside lenses is incredibly important, and how different people apply it to their lives is also important. So I appreciate you bringing that up. If you're stuck thinking that like you have to read Dalai Lama or the Thich Nhat Hanh or the next greatest Buddhist whatever, you don't, you know? Pretty sure everything Jesus taught was pretty much the same thing the Buddha taught, you know? Buddhists refer to him as a living, breathing Bodhisattva, fully enlightened being. You know? Don't become an attached Buddhist. It's dangerous. All right, so we'll close on that. We'll join palms. The benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened up this temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to local folks. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that make sense, hopefully, to those who show up. Every night and every day, pretty much, we have different people leading different practices coming from a different Buddhist tradition. Every Thursday, 4:30, except for the last few weeks, and we're hoping to be back this week, but every Thursday, 4:30, we do a food redistribution program. I still think it's one of the best things we do here. It's preparing gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly. We put it on bread, and we feed people who sleep on the street. So anytime you think your life sucks, go feed people who sleep on the sidewalk, and it really will put things into perspective. And if it doesn't work, go back the next week and keep doing it until it actually has an impact on you. We have been, for the last 2.5 weeks, our downstairs meditation hall, which we built 7 years ago. We moved in to hold primarily our recovery community, but also other classes. We thought a space that held about 30 would be big enough. It's not, so about 2.5 weeks ago, we completely tore open the downstairs and are renovating that space. I'd say we're about 90% done. So hopefully by this Thursday, we'll be back up and running to be able to do food redistribution. But we're really excited to have the new space, which in essence doubled. We've had it blocked off, can't go down there, but it in essence doubles the downstairs meditation hall. So keep kind of posted on the food distribution for Thursday. And one more announcement, and then Robin, I'll ask you, for those who didn't hear, San Diego Pride has awarded the Dharma Bum Temple the Light of Pride Award this year for a faith-based organization. Every year they pick a faith-based organization that exemplifies support with the LGBTQ community. So to receive that award, not only as someone who has an ally and supporter of the Pride community, but so many people here, part of the Pride community, and just a credit for 17 years to everybody who has worked so hard to make this such a safe space. So we will be receiving that word at Light of the Cathedral, which is July 17th at St. Paul's Cathedral. If you've never been there, what an incredible space. I mean, the church is gorgeous. And aside from that, after the beautiful night, a lot of interfaith folks speak. It's a beautiful evening. And then you go outside and they light up the entire cathedral with the pride colors. Super beautiful. So that'll be July 17th. July 20th, we'll be walking as a temple, marching in the parade. So I'll have Robin speak about that in a minute. But the one thing I want to add, Monday, which is the day that the Pride Week, the festival ends, is the time that they have the most difficulty getting volunteers. So we have promised, as long as the Dharma Bum Temple is in existence, we will be showing up that Monday morning to help clean up Balboa Park. So that's on the website as well. Robin, do you want to, anything you want to please share and announce?
Yeah, so as Jeff was saying, we're going to be marching as a temple in the Pride Parade for the first time. So we're really excited about that, and we hope that you'll join us, sign up. It's easy to sign up. There's a flyer outside by the shoe rack, and you can just aim your phone on it, and it's a QR code, and it'll take you right to the link. So please do that. And you can also, if you want to learn more about the Pride Parade, like where is it, where's the route, it's only 1.5 miles. But it'll show you where the route is, and we'll also let you know where the parking is and where the shuttles are and all that. So there's information that you can get from that. And what else? Oh, we're going to have a banner. Our banner is just being designed now. It's going to be beautiful. And so we'll carry that, and we'll also have people, whoever would like to make signs that you can carry or give to someone to carry, saying whatever is in your heart. You know, picture of a flower, peace, breathe, think good thoughts, whatever. So we'll have that. So even if you can't march, maybe think about making a sign. As the time gets closer, we'll know where we're going to be in the parade lineup, which will determine how soon we need to get there to line up. And as we find that out, we'll let you know. So please join us. And if you have any questions, I'm here a lot. You can ask me. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you all. And as always, there's a sign by the door if anyone wants to help stick around and clean up. We have no cleaning crew. We are it.